Thanks everybody for tuning in to my TikTok live at Community Tommy Marquez. And I've been talking to you guys about this for some time. You've seen the videos and you guys have been asking questions. And a lot of them, I'll be quite frank with you, I don't have the best answer to. And so I wanted to provide you with a great resource. And as I was looking up more benefits, I stumbled along this book written by this gentleman, former Undersecretary of VA Benefits, Dr. Paul Lawrence. And I read it, Dr. Lawrence, and I have to tell you, it was really easy to follow. You made it very simple for veterans to understand that they're eligible, and also their dependents for some of those benefits, and what forms to use. And so I want to thank you for doing that, and welcome to introducing everyone, and welcome, please, Dr. Paul Lawrence.
Hey, thanks, Tommy. I'm really glad you said that, because part of what motivated me to write the book was when I was in office, I found very complicated processes, limited information about what it was. What information there was written by lawyers, and we love them, but they write impossibly hard to understand, and people were just very frustrated. And so I said, you know, when I get out, I'm going to look and see if there's a book. I looked, there wasn't one that had all the benefits, easy to read, really help people understand, you know, what they should be accessing. Because don't forget, these are earned benefits. These aren't available to everybody.
Absolutely.
You have to serve by and large honorably, protecting our way of life. And then the American people through Congress have provided special stuff for veterans, and I wanted to make sure they understood it and could access them.
Well, you did a really good job. As I read it in one day. I just sat through and read the entire book. And even for, veteran myself, who is VA service-connected disabled, and a former senior congressional staffer, that was always one of my complaints. Trying to explain things at a level where, everybody could understand. And the VA was horrible at that. And then your administration came in, and I started noticing changes on the website, and I was pleased by that. But then to make it all in one book, it's really impressive, so I really want to thank you for that.
Yeah, if you remember, we were just talking about this in 2020 during the pandemic. I held a bunch of town halls, like 110 of these, where I talked to veterans. I think the number like almost 6 million veterans, answered questions. So I got the chance to answer questions, and more importantly, hear these questions directly. So these were the questions people were asking me, and you realize something's wrong if they're asking the same question over and over again. The information isn't out there, it's presented poorly. We've got to do a better job of connecting information to veterans.
Absolutely. I was in shock after I left working in Congress and I started my own, and I had to explain this to people all the time. I am not a VSO, I am not an accredited agent, and I am definitely not an attorney. I'm just a veteran who has a huge extensive knowledge, nowhere near yours, of VA benefits and the government as a whole. And so I started my own consulting firm, got out of that world altogether. But during the pandemic, I was getting approximately 10 to 15 phone calls in the very beginning from people who needed still assistance with the VA, and they couldn't get a hold of their member, or they had heard from someone else. Not one of those people knew me. And it was a friend of a friend of a friend. And through that process, I said, well, it's taking up too much time, and I hate to say this to people, but it was taking up too much time for me trying to be a government affairs consultant, run my company that I had started. So my niece, who's wonderful and was a communications major, and I felt really bad because I told her that wasn't her real degree, and then I hired her. My apologies to all communication majors. But then I hired her to go ahead and put these on videos. And I said, we're going to charge nothing, we're not going to do VA benefits, that's not what I want to do. Let's just put this out so that I can refer people to these videos. And then she started adding graphics, and the next thing you know, I had a video with almost 500,000 views. And then it didn't reduce the numbers of people communicating with me, unfortunately. And so I always have to give this caveat before I start. Again, I'm not a VSO. I cannot do your claim. I apologize. I wish I could. Honestly, I wish I could. But there's a certain process to doing that, and I no longer work in Congress. So what I do is I just try to talk to as many vets. I give them discounts, deals, life hacks. I'm on Carl's show on Newsmax, and I do some radio shows, and then I just do every social media that there is, trying to reach as many veterans as we can. And all I ask is don't ever try to pay me anything, and take my information, learn from it, and go out there and do it. And then I saw your book, and I got paid nothing to do this, and I wrote a review on your book, and I did a video, and then more people were saying, and then actually, it was so good, so many people were writing in. I did a giveaway on your book, and I think I got about 40,000 people who wrote in asking for a copy of your book. So I only sent out 2. I'm sorry, I don't have 40,000 copies.
I I'll give you a couple more after today. You can
I
get a few more.
appreciate it. Thank you, thank you. So if it's all right with you, I was hoping to speak to you about some of the questions that people have written in, and so we could discuss and hopefully get some answers to their questions.
Absolutely, and often when I speak to veterans in company settings, what I'll do, just for a few minutes, is talk about benefits generally.
Yes,
So
sir.
I kind of covered
Please
this.
do.
And what I want to do is answer the questions. So I was glad when you said you had questions from veterans, because we need to get this information out there. Sometimes it's, just too high level and too vague, having specific situations that, someone's encountering, but chances are lots of people are encountering, makes it great. So sure, let's go through the questions.
All right, I appreciate it. So, some of them are so common, I couldn't get all the names, but wherever I could, I did. Max had written in, and you already answered this about why you decided to write the book, and I appreciate you for explaining that. And you've done an excellent job, like I said, of making the book really simple. I have a hard time, this was, Congress, people try to write to impress their college friends, and explain really convoluted, complex problems using fancy words. I try to make it so that everyone can understand, because I'm not a super highly educated guy. But you kind of answered it, but if you could again, for Max's sake, why did you decide to write this book?
Well, again, I just thought there was a lack of information that made it easy for veterans to access their benefits. So I like to think all the benefits are in one book, often before they're everywhere, it's hard to figure it out. Easy to read, something I went on. I very much understand your point about, if I can't understand it, nobody can understand it, right? And that's really the goal. And I think the book gets you about 90% of the way there. Everyone's situation is different, but it shows you this is the process, here are the forms, this is what you got to do, with some hints about here's some tricks to think about along the way. So hopefully it'll get folks charged up. And again, it talks about here's even how you get no-cost help from the VSOs. Whole chapter about the VSOs, about what to do and how to access that. Whole appendix about how to get help from your state veteran service officers and the like. So again, no-cost help is there as well.
Yeah. And I tell people, not all VSOs are created equally. And to be nice, be professional, and be prepared to do some of the legwork. And I think it's important for people to know when they're going to their VSOs, they should know if they go outside of their VSO, because people ask me this all the time, that you need to ask point blank, can you pay for these services or not with these people? Is this legally allowed? Because there's a lot of rule changes on that.
Right.
And so I tell them, go to a VSO first. A majority of it they can do themselves.
Yeah, go to a VSO. Again, you can probably learn how you're smart and clever online. But don't forget, a VSO, a really good VSO, has done the same thing over and over and over again. It's like the people who repair your car. You'll eventually figure it out. But if they've changed the tires 1,000 times, chances are they're gonna, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
So again,
Absolutely.
you're right. Not everyone is outstanding. Many are. Screen around, shop. There's lots of great organizations. Please take advantage of the free resources. But this is America. You have choices. You can pay if you want. We understand that.
Yeah. Reggie asked this, and this just came in this morning, but dependent removal and additions. A lot of people don't understand if you have a VA service-connected disability, 30% or higher, you get paid for your dependents. I do. There's certain circumstances, apportionments and things like that exempt them. But in general, that process, when people are writing in, it does take a long time. And I tell them, go online and do it. Going online makes it a lot quicker. But why does it take so long for the file claim?
Yeah. Well, so two parts here. Let's go do two parts.
Yes, sir.
Keeping your life status current with VA is really, really important. Okay.
Yeah.
The one where you add a dependent, you get married, you have a kid, and like people get that. Oh, I'll get more. I got to do that. But the sad part to talk about is removing them. A death, a divorce, or your kid turns 18, your child turns 18, and he or she goes off and gets a job. It'll be delayed some for college, but let's say 18,
Yes.
okay? You've got to get those off there, because what often happens is the payments continue, and eventually VA will figure this one out, and they will come get that money back. And when they do, they often do it all at once. So you'll be without your disability payment for a month or 2 or 3 or 4, and not a lot of people can have that kind of hole in their budget. So the life status is really, really important. Why it takes so long for things to get processed is the constant challenge. One is your advice is to do it online is the best advice. But 2, this is simply the management of the agency. And this is what I found out. It's like there are different effectiveness of people applying resources to solve problems. And so it's just taking longer now, and that's just kind of what's gone on. This team is doing things their way, and it is taking longer, and that's about all I can say for that.
No, I understand. What do you think is the biggest misunderstanding veterans have about the VA?
Well, there's a whole bunch, right? So let's kind of like talk about your benefits specifically on
Yes, sir.
the VA more broadly, right? The VA more broadly, I want to start there. The VA more broadly is, I think a lot of people have heard, it's terrible, why would I go there? And it's this urban legend, and it goes back to a time when it was. We know we didn't treat the Vietnam veterans very well. We
Yes.
know so many more steps have been taken, but still some of that lingers, okay? So we used to say all the time, if you had a bad experience, come back, it is different. And I think compared to before, it is better, okay? Is it perfect? No, but few things in life are, but come back, okay? Give it a second chance. That's the one thing, okay? You can get good stuff there. I mean, unfortunately, not everything is good, but you can get by and large good stuff. The big mistake people do with their benefits is, gee, I'm okay, somebody else needs it worse. And you know from your time in Congress, this is what's called mandatory spend. Congress has got to get this money for Social Security, for veterans benefits. It doesn't come at the expense of everything, anybody else's, okay? That's one thing. Two is, I'm fine now. Well, as you know, when we age, things get worse. The classic example is my brother. My brother served in the Army, Airborne Ranger Chemical Corps,
Awesome.
10 years, fighting the good fight, kind of whatever. Goes to my daughter's wedding, it's 20 years later now. Talking to him at the reception afterwards, the wife says, you're going to have to speak in the other ear because he's deaf in this ear. And I go, that's service connected, you realize that. Just because I'm running the agency, I can't do this for you, but that's because you heard loud noises when you rode tanks, right? You heard whatever. I was like, but it just kind of crept up over time. So I always tell people, apply for benefits early. It's better to get them early. You can adjust them as you go on, but things will get worse. And you can just ask anybody. You can Google search this, common disabilities based on your thing. I meet somebody pilot and I go, how's your neck? How's your hearing? How's your back? Like, how do you know that? It's just what you did. You carried, if you're in the Army, you carried a heavy item. You pounded on your knees. You pounded on things. It's just a consequence, so pay attention to that. And the final sort of thing is, they go, no, I'm good, I don't need them. But of course, as you know, and hopefully others will from reading the book or just learning, these benefits can convey to your family. So it's very important you think not only about yourself, but about your family, right? Something happens to you because you were service connected, and because of one of those conditions, your family can get benefits, and this can be life-changing in these kind of situations. So again, a whole range of things. These are benefits that are earned, please apply. And there's no consequence of applying and being rejected.
Yeah. And I think that's such an imperative point about the family, and I tell this to individuals all the time. My quality of life, and this is legitimately why I did this, I had the $26 check video, and that's how I got hired in Congress. Going in, VA benefits, it wasn't paid, I needed that money for Christmas gifts, $26, yes, I was that desperate. And as I got that job and my benefits improved and I learned more things, not only did my quality of life greatly increase, and I literally got my job because of my service connected disability rating. My family's liked it. I was able to give insurance, college money. My wife, at that time, didn't even have an associate's degree. She now has a master's degree, and she is, her earning potential has gone tremendously. And those were all coming from earned benefits.
Right.
And so it's not just you, I tell this to veterans all the time, it's your family.
Right. And so these benefits, think about this in a broad macro sense. We want folks to join the military. We offer them competitive pay, we hope, great experiences. But then when you come out, here's a series of things that can accelerate your pursuit of the American dream. Non-veterans have to save for a down payment to buy a home. Veterans don't with the home loan guarantee. We'll go into debt maybe to go to college. You will not have to with the GI Bill, right? Accelerate your pursuit of the American dream. So this is something that, we should look back and say veterans are incredibly successful because of their military service and what came not only during it, but afterward as a veteran.
Absolutely. Yeah, I owe my entire life, my house, the current situation I'm in, my job now, my job before, all through VA benefits, through GI Bill, VA home loan. I always am thankful and appreciative of that. And I want that for other veterans as well. All right, so we always hear the negative horror stories about the VA, and we were just sharing some before we started here. But it can't all be bad, and it is improved a lot. The Choice Act, Mission Act,
Right.
Those definitely improve outside care, outside community care, and things like that. But what do you believe right now, currently, is the best thing the VA is doing for veterans?
Well, it does a lot of things really well, and you're right. When we were there, the secretary used to say there's 400,000 employees, and the 200 knuckleheads get all the attention, right? It's by and large a really great organization. The trust scores are very high. When people match, when they get healthcare and they sync with their doctor, they just rave about that experience, okay? And there's things that are going on in VA healthcare that really can't take place anywhere else. Prosthetic, traumatic brain injury, this is where the experts are, and people forget. 70% of the doctors in the United States are trained in the VA system.
Wow.
They've done their residency there, they've learned. There's something magic about what's going on that all the doctors want to go there. And I'll tell you the truth, my son was an optometrist, glasses. He did his residency there. The training he got from the 1 year in resident at the VA Medical Center in Hampton, Virginia, I think when he got out and looked for a job, I think his wages were 10% higher because what they knew he had learned. So the medical care can work. Yeah, I know sometimes it's hit or miss, and that's kind of life, but the medical care is really good. Your claims and your process can be done quick, fast, in a hurry. If the information is assembled, and we'll talk about that. I think the GI Bill, the education benefit, is really first rate and
Yes.
continues to be drawn on, okay? And if anything, we'll talk about, what needs to be changed. People are putting more and more demands on that as education is changing. So there's a lot really good. I would encourage people, investigate it. Don't be turned off by horror stories. Don't be turned off by barracks, the loudmouth in the barracks. There's a lot of really good stuff that Congress has spent a lot of time making sure the veterans have.
So, sort of crude, but one of my better videos is me explaining that the people in the military don't know crap about the VA. They're active duty. They've heard it's a scuttlebutt, but they've never experienced it. So they're just talking, scuttlebutt, rumor mill, and I tell people, we've all gone to a restaurant that we've heard from somebody previously. Oh, it sucks, it's horrible, blah, blah, blah. And you can go there and have a great experience. It just depends on the waitress and the cook that day.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So, and restaurants can improve, restaurants can decline.
Right.
And that could be your experience of the VA. So that's not a good reason to not get care.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And again, by having a service officer help you, a veteran service officer help, you can minimize the downside, right? They can advocate for you. They can help you with certain things. They can explain some consequences of the processes you're about to go into.
So Big John writes, why does the BVA appeals process take so long, and how can veterans speed up the BVA process?
Yeah. Now, what's really interesting about the VA, maybe you can tell me this, because I can tell you this does not work at the IRS. At the VA, you can appeal any decision people make
Yes.
for you. Try this with the IRS.
Over and over
Yeah,
and
and they will laugh at you, okay? So you can appeal. So if you don't like, hey, I didn't get what I wanted when I did my disability claim, I got denied or too low. You can even do this for your medical issues as well, and even cemetery if that's what you decide to do. So you got a couple choices, and this is what's different about a law that President Trump signed into effect in 2019, which went in 2017, which went into effect in 2009. It's called Appeals Modernization.
Yes.
Okay. So it used to be you had to go to a judge, 3 to 7 years, all kinds of problems. So there's a couple. There's 3 options you can think about. This is broadly, and they can learn more about it. One, you can go back to the Veterans Benefits Administration and do what's called a higher level review. It's sort of like you see on the NFL. More experienced people will look at your claim again and see if they made a mistake. And the veteran can even talk to them in advance and point out the mistake. Hey, I told you my knee was hurt. Obviously, we didn't see the knee information. See on page 6, knee information. They'll correct mistakes that way. That's one. You can do something, and that generally is taking 125 days or so to get done. Okay, you can do something called a supplemental claim, okay, where they say, you hurt your knee, but I didn't see any knee information. Here's some more information. Here's some supplemental information to help you look at my knee, okay? Again, quick, fast, in a hurry, relatively speaking. The third option you have is go to the Board of Veterans Appeals. You have options there, but let's not go into that. That'll be like cracking walnuts with sledgehammers. But basically, you will see a judge, and he or she will look at this and decide what they think is fair. And if you're even unhappy, you can go to the Court of Veteran Claims beyond there. You can go to Supreme Court if it works really well, right? But
Brown versus.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? So that's it, you can be there. But why this takes so long is there's a limited number of judges, people have to go there. It's a supply and demand problem. So I would always encourage people, you can do whatever you want. I would do the first 2 first, the higher level review, the supplemental claim, before you go get a judge. But it just takes a while. A lot of people want to see a judge. There's something about that special magic. Some people tell me, I never saw this to be true. Oh, those guys at the Veterans Benefits don't like me. I got to go see a judge. That's not true.
They don't know who you are.
Yeah. It will take longer. It just will take longer, and that's kind of the way it works. And yeah.
Yeah, I always tell my friends, if you go to the BVA first, I'm going to punch you. Because it's going to be 7 years before it's heard. And it's backed up, and that is a situation where I believe you can get it done quicker, and then you are slowing the process down, you are hurting other people's
Yeah.
lives or need. I know the Vietnam vets, the Blue Water, which is another task that you accomplished, and I appreciate that, getting those guys their benefits. You know, they were appealing over and over and over again, and I felt for them, but it did contribute, like many other things too, the process being slow. In your book, you explain, and it's awesome, the book explains this, and I actually started using the definition that you give in the book on what is a direct service connection.
Sure.
Could you explain it further?
Sure, the book goes into detail, but let me just give a simple example, right? A direct service connection is an injury or disability or something that happened to you while you were in service. And I think the key thing is while you're in service. So let's go through some examples. You were in combat and you got wounded. It's pretty easy to figure out.
Yes.
That's a direct service connection, okay? Hurt your knee in this situation. But don't forget, you were in the service and you were training and you hurt your knee. That's still a direct service connection. And the part people don't think about is, while I was in the service, I was playing basketball with my friends on the post at the gym, and I hurt my knee. That is also service connected. So while you were in the service, if something happens to you, generally speaking, that's direct service connections.
Awesome. Now let's talk about secondary service connection.
The secondary service connection is pretty much what it sounds. Because of the first thing, something happened. So this is where people often don't really see kind of how this plays out, right? So I hurt my knee, I got service connected for my knee. Now, I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm kind of taking a liberal use of this, okay?
Yes, sir.
A year or two later, now my hip hurts. But I never hurt my hip, I never did anything. Well, come to find out, remember knee bone's connected to the hip bone? Like, it's because it is a secondary condition. Because you hurt your knee, now your hip is injured, therefore you can now apply for benefits for that. So I think the challenge is to understand just the relationship between your body systems, as they're called. And again, this is where a veteran service officer can help you. They will look and say, gee, Tommy, because of what you did in the service, yeah, you hurt your ankle. But I'm gonna tell you, in a year or two, I'm guessing your knee's gonna, your knee's gonna hurt. In a couple of years, maybe something else will go on because of that. So they can give you insight to the secondary conditions that, again, you can apply for benefits for those.
Great definition, sir, I appreciate it. I try to explain it, and again, I plagiarize your book in my videos.
That's okay, it's out there for everybody.
And if you're just joining us, again, we're with Dr. Paul Lawrence, the former Undersecretary of the VA, and the author of this book, Veteran Benefits for You. It is available super cheap on Amazon. I highly recommend it to every veteran. I've done videos on it. I get paid nothing, this is not a paid thing. I actually begged him to come here. But it's just such a good read, and if you're a veteran, or you care for a veteran, or you know a veteran who's got VA questions, other than just watching my videos, I highly recommend getting this book, because it explains everything at a really simple level that even somebody like me could understand. Okay, so this is one that's bothered me. So yes, I'm on social media, and there's two things, like, is this a good social media site, or is this a bad social media site? And I tell people this all the time. That's not the big problem. My big problem is the misinformation that's on social media. And I'm not talking political misinformation. I'm talking about VA benefits. And I've seen people getting 300,000-400,000 views. And I don't want to call out the group that started this misinformation, but they looked at a CBO report, this is the Congressional Budget Office, which is not Congress. These are not elected members. The CBO puts on, a couple thousand reports every year. And if your children are ever suffering from insomnia, I highly recommend you read them to them. They'll be out like that. They're very boring, very numbery. But they put out a report, and then I saw, this is so universal, I couldn't believe it. They said, well, the VA is trying to means test your benefits. It came out of this report, these groups, and all these social media posts are going on that. And then I heard, it's President Trump did this. And then I heard, no, this is President Biden. And I did videos, but, explaining, none of this is true. No one is trying to means test that. The examples that were given are misleading, and it actually says in the report that this is not a suggestion. So the question for you is, sir, just can you crush this and just put this to an end? When you were Undersecretary, did you ever hear about the VA recommending that we should means test service-connected disability, sir?
Yeah, so let's be clear. President Trump was a huge advocate for veterans. This never came up during his period of time as president. In fact, if I were to think about one way I would have been quickly got a tweet and been fired, is to talk about this. Because President Trump made that as part of the campaign promise to really advocate for veterans. And a lot of the stuff we just talked about
And he did
was
an
because
excellent job.
he signed these laws that made all these things possible. So this never came up. This came up during the present team's tenure. Now, of course, as you know, everything you said is exactly true, but sometimes they float ideas as a way to see kind of what happens, okay?
Yes.
Once this was floated out, people understood exactly what this was, and it was kiboshed pretty quickly. But what I also think we need to make veterans aware of is, of course, there are a lot of people now who do not have veteran experiences, right? 1% of the population serves, their friends and whatever, it's getting less and less of the population. They see big numbers for veterans benefits, and they begin to ask questions like, why is this number so large? So this is just an example of stuff that may pop up from time to time. People say, that's a big number, we're trillions of dollars in debt, we wonder about this. What I think we have to continue to point out, though, is veterans benefits are not entitlements, these are earned benefits. Anybody can have them, you just gotta serve, and that's what we have to remind people. Further, these are promises we made to veterans 40, 60, 50 years ago. They don't get to be changed overnight because some bean counter, and unfortunately, many of these support organizations, the OMB, are not veterans.
Absolutely.
So again, this kind of comes up.
They're not even 30.
Yeah. We just need to remind folks about what this promise really is and remind them. Now, as an aside, had they ever done this, this would be virtually impossible to administer. So it would have been just a colossal nightmare. So hopefully even cooler heads at some level prevailed.
Yeah, I did a video outside of the Capitol the last time I was here, and I said, if that happened, I would lead the charge, and all those, I can guarantee you, all those congressional, it will never happen because they know they would lose their seats.
Well, you remember our history here, go back to the 1930s, the famous bonus march, right? Those are veterans upset because of the benefits that have been promised them in World War I. Politicians remember this. They remember what happens when
A good way to lose your seat in Congress is to float the idea of taking away veterans' benefits.
Yeah. Well, reneging on promises you've made is just not good. It's not good.
No, absolutely not. So thank you for putting that to an end. What was sad was I actually had people say, wait, it's not means tested already? I was like, what do you guys, come on, man. So check everything on social media, even me. I issue a challenge. If I have something wrong on my social media, let me know. I'll do a video apologizing, correcting it, giving them a shout out. I'll send them cigars or whiskey.
Yeah.
Because I want to be factually accurate, but challenge everything you see on social
Well, just so you know, I'm on LinkedIn. That's the one I choose just because it's LinkedIn. And that's kind of how I started making videos about benefits because I just saw people, and I don't think they were intentionally wrong. They just didn't know. So I had a unique experience where I got to watch over these and learn about these. So I can say, actually, this is how it works, right? Let me see if I can explain it so you have more information to make your decisions.
What should veterans do if they believe the medical examiner for a VA service-connected disability examination was not professional or sort of had their mind already made up during an exam, sir?
Yeah, so let's kind of go through this, right? So what you're talking about is you apply for disability compensation and VA will send you out for what's called a CMP exam, compensation and pension, CMP exam, where someone will do, again, it's not diagnostic medicine, right? Hey, what's wrong? Here, I'm going to prescribe. It's more to check. It's much more like a physical. So part of it is understanding what you're going to do. If you feel you had a bad experience, should be able to, you get a survey form right after that. You can give them a bad result. You can call VA and complain at the 1-800-827-1000 number and say, I want to complain. You can write a letter to the people. These are often contractors who perform it. You can write a letter to the company and say, I've done stuff like that. Now, I'll give you two examples.
Yes, sir.
We got a complaint from, happened to be a woman in this example when I was there, and said, hey, I believe I was a victim of inappropriate touching. Okay?
I know this case.
By the time I called the company to complain, they had already taken the doctor out of anything to do with Veterans Affairs. So the companies, by and large, I found weren't good. Okay? The other thing you can do, I don't recommend this, but I will share this story with you. Again, a female went to a CMP exam in a place. I won't describe this because it could be too much information. And she tweeted, look at this, where this location is. I feel very uncomfortable getting out of my car and going into this. Well, as luck would have it, I was going to speak at a nearby place, and I said, let's go by and stop and see this, because the tweet made it to my office, and it was disturbing. And I thought this was a rational person describing a behavior, right? So we actually stopped, and I agreed. I called the company and said, you cannot do any more activity in this office. In fact, let's go back and look at these, make sure these locations feel comfortable. And to be honest with you, not just for women, for men too, this wasn't a difficult, I wouldn't say a seedy part of town, but it had that sense. So I wouldn't recommend you do that, but that kind of stuff works. Now, the second part of your question is, have they made up their mind? Don't forget, this is just a bit of information into the claim.
Yes.
Okay? So they don't decide your claim. They're really just to say, oh, you hurt your knee, I see all the documentation. Some things you have to do in person in knees and arms, for example, there's like limitations on mobility, so they'll test and see kind of whatever. So they don't really decide anything, but I understand what you described. I left there, I had a bad vibe. It did not feel really good, and I want somebody to know about that. My strongest recommendation is don't be silent. It can't get any better unless people find out these things. I did not like the tweet, but I was glad it was done in this case, because I think the person had a very good point. Again, we must encourage veterans to please go and complain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Kind of a funny, very ambiguous question, but I've had several people write in on this, sir. What VA benefit needs the biggest update?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I'd point out sort of a couple things, okay? A couple things. Sort of the big three of benefits that I think people tend to focus on are disability compensation, the GI Bill education benefit, and the home loan guarantee. Each one of those, I think,
They're all great benefits.
they're all great benefits, but they probably need to be modernized. So let me give you an example, okay? If you have limitations of your sight, you get certain benefits. But what we know is that back in the day when you had limitations of sight, your ability to be employed were greatly restricted. Now, of course, we know things have changed through technology, through audio stuff and whatever. I'm not so certain the limitations for sight in terms of your employment options are the same. So it's probably worth looking at disability compensation to make sure the benefits are in line with present technologies in employment. Now, that sounds like reductions in benefits, but don't forget, we're also getting smarter about mental health. Before, we didn't know anything about mental health. Now, I think if we continue to do modernization of stuff, we'll find more areas where maybe benefits need to be increased. So again, I'll look at disability compensation. I feel the same thing is true about the GI Bill and education benefits. There are a lot of ways where student veterans are getting educated in a certain way. And also, there's a lot of folks choosing not to go to college, missing out on this benefit. So I know later we're gonna talk about what might be some new benefits. I have some thoughts for the education benefits and even the home loan guarantee. Again, how people live and how people buy homes is changing.
Oh, yes.
We need to make sure that benefit, which is by and large pretty good, stays sort of current as people look at stuff.
Yeah, yeah. The market has definitely shifted. One of my complaints in Texas, which is a great state, love it, love it. I don't want the Latrell brothers coming after me. They have a cap on how big the Texas Veteran Land Board can give you as a loan. Unfortunately, the increase, with the way that Texas real estate has boomed,
Yeah.
they didn't match. But I'm still able to use it. They gave me a better loan rate than anyone else, so shout out to the Texas Veteran Land Board.
Yeah, don't forget your home loan guarantee from VA has no limit. It's
Correct,
only-
that's through the state,
No,
not
it's
through
through,
the.
yeah, that's right.
And also, the VA doesn't give you a home loan, right?
Yeah, it's guaranteed, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so a lot of veterans, and I've seen this in my time as a senior congressional staffer, working in Congress, and I see it on my TikTok feed all the time, and my Instagram feed as well. They complain that their VRE counselor has told them that the VRE will not pay for a master's degree. Now, I know the answer to this, but is that an accurate statement from the counselor?
No, that's absolutely false. So let's talk about VRE, Veterans Readiness and Employment, used to be VOC Rehab, okay?
Yes.
It's a special benefit to veterans who are service-connected 10% or more. And so the idea behind it is, of course, you went off to service and you had some plan of getting a job. Maybe you're gonna be a teacher. You're gonna stand for long periods of time, okay? Something happened to you in service and now you can't stand for long periods of time. You cannot be a teacher in this example I'm making up. What this entitles you to is to meet with a counselor and have them look at what are the possibilities that would make sense for you, okay? Often it's a test, it's a meeting, it's kind of whatever, okay? So this is designed to let you, hey, I want to be a rocket scientist. You didn't even pass high school biology. That's not gonna happen, okay? But what that's supposed to do is essentially set in motion the beginning of the development of a plan, what makes sense for you to kind of pursue a life now, post-service, given that you're service connected. That plan sets in motion a series of things. Often it can be education, often it can be special training, whatever you need to pursue that thing, okay? It is at that point that this kind of happens, right? The counselor does some evaluation somehow and concludes, no, I don't think you should get a master's degree to go off and do something, or like whatever, okay? So that conversation has not gone the way the veteran had done it. There's nothing wrong. All counselors are, receive the same training, but they often come up with different opinions, and often the same, virtually the same set of circumstances would be rendered by different, decisions would be rendered by counselors that are different. Okay, it's very frustrating, again, think about the appeals process, but it is absolutely false to say there is a hard rule that nobody gets a master's degree. The ERD has been used to pay for master's degrees, doctorate degrees, a whole set of it, because the counselor felt that was appropriate for the veteran's path to get them into what's called sustainable employment, right?
Thank you. What do you believe, Dr. Lawrence, veterans can do to improve the VA?
Yeah, well, there's a couple sort of things I'd recommend at a broad level, okay? One is, as veterans, we should be talking about the kind of services that VA renders for healthcare, for benefits, for memorial service, and describing it and say, we as veterans demand you provide world-class treatment, world-class healthcare, world-class benefits, not okay-ish, not it doesn't suck as bad as it did before, not it's okay, pretty bad. We demand the very best of that. We would see that in terms of access time, how quickly can I get an appointment, how good are the outcomes, how fast are my benefits done, how great is the memorial service, okay? So we should be telling everybody, okay isn't good enough, or good enough isn't good enough, as they say.
Yes, sir.
So we should, second thing is we should encourage everybody, here's where your expertise can come in, to really, we've got to hold people accountable. This notion that it just kind of all happens, right? And here's where I think Congress can do more oversight. Say, listen, when something happened that didn't go well, what exactly did we do other than go, oh, we're gonna go study it some more, oh, we're gonna go think about it more. It's like, no, when something bad happened, it was because someone did or didn't do something, and how about we hold them accountable? And this isn't to be mean to the people who made a bad decision or whatever. It is to show veterans, the customers, that we really take this serious, that it isn't just one big joke or a hobby, that these are highly skilled people who get paid a lot of money to do the right thing, and when they don't, so in terms of veterans, yes, you should advocate for stuff, but I think we as a whole should be demanding so much more from the system.
I tell every veteran they should be writing their members of Congress and their members of the Senate. Because I know for me, as a former staffer for a member of Congress, I read all those things, and I wanted to see improvement. And it's just imperative that Congress is the first step to really changing. The president can do a lot of executive orders, but in order for it to be a law or to change code and federal regulation, it has to start with Congress writing that law in the Senate. And so if they don't know that these problems exist, they really can't fix it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think exactly right. Tell people, right? I remember I was doing the town halls, people would say something, I get on the phone, they were in a cranky mood, say, I'm really unhappy, I'm going to write the president. I said, you can do that, but he's going to forward me the letter, and I'm going to have to deal with that letter. So you can tell me right now, we can figure out what went wrong, and we can try to understand it, but it's exactly that, right? But I know people get frustrated, which is, how many times will I have to complain and nothing happens? So that's my accountability kind of point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Another writer wrote in saying, some veterans have college trade schools close on them while they were receiving their GI Bill benefits. This happened a lot when I was working in Congress at a specific school. I won't say who they are, but if I ever cross their paths, I'm punching them in the face. Because they did it on purpose, and they would reopen under a different name. Can the veterans who lost those benefits in that time potentially ever receive some of those GI Bill benefits back?
Yeah, here's where they gotta do their homework, because as you know, laws changed. I think this was when the 2017 adjustment to the GI Bill that allowed for some of that time to be recredited back to your GI Bill. So it sort of depends when this happens. So again, here's where a service officer can really help you, okay? Now, there's something to really talk about here though, because you raise a good point, which is, how is it these schools get to be out there offering services to veterans, okay? Well, one thing to understand and appreciate is those schools have to be approved by the state.
Yes.
Okay, the state approving agency, okay? So at some point you go, how do they show up and be able to use the GI Bill? VA doesn't approve, they rely on the states. So there's a lot of conversation between how did this all happen, right? So the states can be a little better from time to time at looking at that, but that's a little long conversation. But the answer is yes, maybe, depending upon the time and the circumstances.
Excellent. What should veterans do? This comes in all the time. People write in, but what should veterans do if their injuries weren't documented while they were in the military?
Yeah, this is the classic question, okay, right? Theoretically, supposed to get hurt, you go to the doctor, now it's in your service treatment record. When someone says, yeah, you go back and do this, but a lot of
Never happens to Marine vets.
I've had 3 stars tell me, we didn't do that, we took naproxen, we just kind of fired on, and now my knees, my ankles, my hips, they're all bad, what do I do? This is where a service officer can really help you, because they deal with this question all the time. I'm gonna give you sort of a textbook answer.
Yes, sir.
Is what you wanna do is get statements, they're called buddy statements, where there's somebody who saw what happened to you. I fell off a ladder, I hurt myself, I never told anybody, but John Smith or Jane Smith was here with me, they saw it, they could write something about it. Someone who saw something, who saw it happen. If they didn't see it happen, they, like next best, they saw you the next day complaining about it. They could see 6 months later when you returned from deployment what had happened. Some evidence to prove that it really happened in service, okay? So again, buddy statements is the broad terminology. It's pretty much, whatever you think would pass to demonstrate that this in fact happened. Because don't forget, what you need to do to get disability compensation is, were you injured in service?
Right.
So you would demonstrate in the statement, they were injured and it happened during the period of time they were in service. So again, service officers tend to be invaluable around this point.
And for those of you who are just joining us, he goes over what is a direct service connection in his book. He has a great explanation in the book, Veteran Benefits for You. So it's a really simple, and I've done tons of videos on it, and on LinkedIn, we can find you there also explaining that. So for those people who are just joining us. And I'm butchering his name, Ali Bakharov wrote, in your book, you list tons of little known benefits. What do you believe is the least underutilized or the least known benefit for veterans that they should probably know about?
Well, this is kind of a touch away, but this is really important because I encounter this a lot. But one benefit that people maybe not realize is what's called the veteran's pension, okay? And this tends to be, pension sounds like retirement, but they're not. This is like a means-tested safety net, okay? So let me give you a classic example. Veteran in your neighborhood, perhaps old veteran, kind of whatever, towards the end of his life, and you wonder, he's by himself, how can you afford to live here in this house, what's what, okay? They may be eligible for a veteran's pension, having served during a certain period of time. So it's not an age thing. It could be 65, could be service connected, which could be over 65. And what they'll do is say, we will look at your assets and we will take out your house, your car, and other significant things. And if you don't have assets above $150,000, which is once you take that out, a lot won't, you'll get a small pension every month to help you survive. So again, a lot of people worry about an older veteran, the uncle, the extended uncle, the family, just the neighbor, you're wondering how can they exist. Now, where this also comes into play is for homeless veterans.
Yes.
Okay? So you see someone homeless or whatever, they could very well be eligible for this veteran's pension. And many times, that's the way you get people back on their path. And again, you say, okay, well, like, your friends could be on the cusp of homelessness. Your buddies could be on the cusp of homelessness. Lost my job, couch surfing, and the like. They need to be aware of this. So this is one of these benefits that can really change the trajectory of folks who are maybe traveling down a pretty unfortunate path.
For veterans who are 100% TDIU, temporary disability, individual unemployability, I get this all the time. Can they work?
Yeah, this is a definitional kind of thing.
Yes, sir.
So TDIU, or often just called IU, is essentially a gross up of your benefits because you are not able to work. So the classic example goes like this. I am 60 or 70% service connected. I may have a couple that add up to this or whatever, okay? But I'm not 100%, right? But because of this, I can't work, okay? So classic example is I hurt myself, I'm in pain all the time, when I go to work, I fall asleep in the job, and nobody wants to hire me. That's kind of a gross example, okay? This benefit, the TDIU part was supposed to be okay. As long as you cannot get a job, even though you're 60 or 70% in my example, we will pay you as if you are 100%, okay? Now, the way you kind of get this benefit is you demonstrate you cannot get a job. So you say, well, I really did try, I got fired, or whatever the examples would be, okay? So by definition, definition, you can't work, right? That's kind of it. Once you work, you would not be eligible for the gross up of the TDIU. Now that sounds like a pretty good thing until you realize that really, we want people to work.
Yes.
This is, I think, the bigger headline. So veterans benefits are not unattractive. So if you're 100%, tends to be about $4,000 plus or minus tax-free every month, which sounds like a pretty good deal, right? $48,000, which if you gross up for taxes would be like in the early 60s, which is what the average person in America earns if you go and do all the tables, okay? So you're right, it's a good average kind of thing. But again, veterans can do much more under the right circumstances. I'm not minimizing the folks who appropriately get TDIU, but if we have folks who are, hey, this is a pretty good deal I got going, I'm not making all that much of an effort to look for a job, I'd say that's probably not the right path.
Right.
Take the benefits you've earned and think about employment as a much longer term thing that will be better for you. And again, if you have friends, maybe you can talk to them about that. But by definition, to answer the question, you cannot earn TDIU and work.
Alan Carnes 24 wrote in, what legislation would you like to see Congress pass regarding VA benefits? And I think Tabletop 88 and several other people who written in, they're talking about the Major Richard Starr Act. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
Yeah, I know what that is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But they're asking that. But in general, what would you like to see?
Yeah, so if I got the name right, Major Star is the whole thing where you get your disability compensation on top of your retirement from the DoD. That is
under 50.
Yeah, that is sinful. That when I first heard about that, I said, gee, what kind of morons are in Congress, Tommy, who don't understand retirement is deferred compensation, disability compensation is for economic impairment. They are two different things. You cannot offset them. So I think it's great that they're getting around to this, and it's just a shame it exists, right? No one can explain it. So I'm 100% on that one, okay? The other thing, though, I think I'd point out, which is what I would also do, is like the GI Bill, the education benefit. If you go back to, and I bet you're an expert in this as well, 1944, the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, which they called the GI Bill, right? Everyone's coming back. This is the GI Bill for them. At that point, veterans were eligible for a payment to start a business. That's disappeared over time. So we talk about the GI Bill.
I had no idea.
Just in education, yeah, it was $5,000. You could start a business, right? You could a home loan guarantee, go to college, you can start a business. The starting a business thing disappeared. So I think we should begin to look at that benefit and say, hey, there's a lot of veterans who would rather not go to college, but would like to start their own business, okay? Could we, because look, if you go to college and you use this benefit well, it's worth about 120, it's more than 125,000. Education, it's the tuition fees and all that, for 4 years of school, 4 times 30 is 120. Then we're gonna give you monthly housing allowance for another 36 months. So that's another $70,000 on average, so it's like $200,000. So I want to open a business. Could I have $200,000? I'm not so certain about the numbers, but I understand that point. The other thing too is, what if I don't want either of the above? I don't want to go to college, and I don't want to open a business. But what about me? So what if we said, hey, I tell you what, you promise not to touch the money, we'll stick some money in an IRA for you. So when you're 65, you're a millionaire, okay? We'll put it in an IRA. You have to promise not to touch it till you're 65. We'll put it in some growth stock and blah, 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 blah. Will that? So I think folks need to understand what that promise was in 1944 will change your life with college, because remember, 1 in 10 people have gone to college, right, in 1944. Now, 60 or 40, whatever the number is, a lot of people go to college, but there might be other ways to do this. So I would think legislatively, someone could go back and say, what were those original promises? How have things changed? Might we not really move the needle with some other possibilities? Those are just some examples.
No, I'm blown away with your answer. That is remarkable. I have never heard of that rule for starting a business, and I have veterans constantly reaching out to me, and I have to talk to them about nonprofits.
Yeah.
Nonprofits, or family and friends to start off, and I started my own business. Like, I didn't need a lot of capital because I have a lot of overhead, but for a lot of them, I know they're buying franchises. Yeah. And that would be tremendous. So you just became like the most popular guy on TikTok.
Well, no, the other thing is, okay, so while we're building on that, we're all building up, don't forget, the home loan guarantee, you will get equity in your home. A lot of veterans use that equity in their home to start their own business. It's a little risky, but it can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point as well. So, in your time as the undersecretary, what was the biggest mistake veterans were making when applying for a VA service-connected disability?
Yeah, so sort of two I'd point is, one is they didn't apply, kind of at the beginning of the conversation, which talking about, they didn't apply, I didn't apply. Or it's too late, it's never too late, you can always come back. You served all this time ago, is it too late? But probably the one I would point out is, they had an incomplete application, okay? And let me explain, right? So, you turn your stuff in, but what the adjudicator, the person making the decision will need is medical information, as well as demonstration this wasn't service. So yeah, you can give them a DD 214, you can say, go get my medical record, okay? That's more complete than not, but you can even go out of your way and say, look, on page 46 you will see this, right? On this you will see that. So they really didn't, bring all the information in such a way that the adjudicator could see it, right? And so it's sort of like, it's okay to get it all ready so someone can look at it and go, yes, 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 approved, okay? Again, they often they did it by themselves. Again, a service officer could really help them, but, presenting as complete a claim as possible is your best sort of point you want to start from, okay? So that's where it's like, an incomplete claim would result in back and forth, or people just looking at it and go, this is a no, I can't make any sense out of that.
Sounds good. And again, with your book, it explains the forms they need to use and what to look for and even if they're eligible. And I tell this to people all the time, this is why I really like the book. There's a million different things that you don't know. The VA is so big.
Yeah.
Right? When I reached out to you, I said, I won't ask any VHA questions because that's a whole,
Yeah, it's a whole nother thing.
that's a whole other thing. As people ask me all the time, about the Navy. And I said, okay, well, this is my knowledge of what I, understood of the Navy. And then, prior to working in Congress, they said, well, what about the Coast Guard? I have no idea. And what they don't even understand is that the VA is larger than that.
Right.
So it's a great thing. If you could change one VA benefit that's current right now, you make a change to it, and we kind of highlighted on this, what would that benefit be? Probably
Well, I talked about the GI Bill, right? So I talked about, but the other thing what folks don't realize is there's several different flavors of the GI Bill. There's a Montgomery GI Bill, there's whatever, but you can talk to your buddies in Commerce. I wish there were just one GI Bill. That would be just really good. I'm not suggesting we take away any benefits from anybody, but in thinking about my old job, administering multiple GI Bills is just a real challenge. And so in terms of making VA better, if there were one GI Bill, I think that would be something that could really help.
Do you think, and this is something, and I apologize to spring this on you, but I'm just thinking about this for my family. Dependency Education Assistance, Chapter 35. I've had people write in, and I did a video about a month and a half ago that caused a little bit of controversy saying, what benefits need to be updated and improved. And, we talked about CHAMP VA, which is VHA, and I don't want to get into VHA stuff. I want to focus on VBA. But CHAMP VA needs to be improved, current VHA secretary. But Dependency Education Assistance is still paid at the old school Montgomery GI Bill level. I think it's like $14, $18 a month, which is still great. It is still something, right? And if you have no benefits, that's a great help. That's something to get you over. But is there any way, and I know it takes Congress, it doesn't take that, people understand, the secretary does not get to make laws.
Yeah.
You don't get to say, I think I'm gonna pay it this way. No, I appreciate that, and I wanna just, make sure everyone understands. I'm not saying that you should have done that by any stretch of the imagination. That was my job as a Congress, to get my member to create a bill like that. But do you think in the future, let's say if President Trump was to win, do you think there's a possibility that we could talk about improving the dependency education system on us? Not to be exactly the post 9/11 GI Bill, because remember, people pay into the GI Bill. No one pays into dependency education assistance. You think it's possible at all?
I think we should look at things that are outdated like that, okay? And as you point out, they're legislative, so sometimes Congress just doesn't want to spend.
It's more on me than you.
Yeah, what is ironic, sometimes Congress just doesn't want to spend any more money, which is kind of hard to imagine, but they do, that's what they look at. So there's a couple things like I can think about almost immediately. That's one. I will tell you, when I talk to Medal of Honor recipients, they're awesome people, but they all point out, most people are unaware of this, by law, there's a Medal of Honor stipend, okay? It's about $1,300 a month, which again is better than nothing until we realize these folks are asked to go to every high school graduation in the country to speak about their experiences. They're in tremendous demand. The number of living Medal of Honor recipients is relatively small numbers.
Yes.
And that $1,300 is supposed to help them do all those things. Not possible. And finally, of course, the burial benefit, again by law, is a certain amount of money. Burials cost 10 times more, if I remember the numbers right, but I probably have them wrong. And And again, those need to be updated. It's one of those things where over time, it just hasn't stayed up. So I think, like a lot of states, the way they tax cigarettes is they do it as a percentage of the price. So when the price goes up, I think sometimes maybe you could tell your friends, think about articulating benefits as a certain number plus the CPI over time or something like that.
Yeah, burial benefits, I don't think they've been approved when we did that bill since 1968. That was before I was born. I've been fortunate, I haven't had to use that expense, but I had several veterans who came to me and their spouses, and they've explained that process, and I was blown away by how, if you think the dependency education system allowance is low, burying a veteran is
Well, not only that, just kind of build on that, not only is the allowance low, but you'll be required to do a tremendous amount of paperwork to even rationalize getting that. So you're equally frustrated, right? I did all this stuff and I got a small fraction of what I spent potentially.
Yes, sir. I kind of alluded to this before, I wanted to get it again. With your book, it lists all the benefits, and it makes all the forms, and tells you where to go on the websites, as of when it was printed, obviously. Why isn't the VA handing out this book and making their website like this now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that, because partially what I set out to do was to make a document that was easier to understand and more accessible. And I think by and large, from feedback as well as the reviews on Amazon, that appears to be work. I don't know the answer to that question. It kind of befuddles me because publishers offer bulk discounts to large purchases. So if they were to say something like 200,000 transitioning veterans every year would love them to get their hands on this, I'm sure that can be done at affordable prices. When you consider the VA's budget is $350-ish billion, a few dollars to get everyone information would be valuable, and if they access the benefits, probably pay for itself, but I just don't know the answer to that question.
Well, let me ask this. If I was to get 3 genie wishes and I was, if I had the power, or whoever has the power, and you become undersecretary again, or secretary of the VA, would you put that as a priority, as making their websites more understandable and easier to read, and just give simple explanations like this, sir?
Oh yeah, no, I put that as a priority when I was there before. I said, nobody
You
can
did improve it quite a bit.
nobody can understand this. It's impossible. It's like, I know you're not from this area, but what I describe it as, it's like the street maps in Northern Virginia. If you know where you're going, the street maps are really helpful, but if you're not, you're gonna get lost, okay? And that's the same thing I felt about the website. It is hard to understand. Nobody can figure it out. And I never understood why, let's bring veterans in and listen to their complaints, let them try to access it. It's not only just veterans, but don't forget, many veterans are old. They have caregivers, so the caregivers could not be veterans, right?
Right.
Being grandkids or whatever. We need to hear from that, so absolutely, accessibility should be the #1 thing, right? It should be easy for folks to understand and not be a morass.
I did this when I started my videos. My communications person, who I explained was my niece, greatest girl ever, we would do the videos, and I would have her and my daughters watch the videos, and they're not veterans. And I would say, do you understand it? And initially they were like, no, and I realized I need to make the videos where somebody who never served, who has really no knowledge of the military other than me, be able to understand it. And, the book does that.
Right.
My wife read this, and she was saying, hey, I totally get this. And, having the websites definitely made the language a lot more easier, so it's not just a veteran, because as we know, the spouses, the dependents, they're eligible for benefits too.
Right.
And they may not know the lingo, the lexicon, the verbiage that the veteran's gonna know. So having that simpler would be paramount.
Yeah, absolutely. So you make a really good point about the family and how everybody needs to know about this and be able to do this. But the other thing is I'd even build on that. It's like, think about what this information does in terms of broader society. And perhaps this has happened to you, where someone comes to you and says, will you talk to my 17-year-old son or daughter?
Oh, yes.
He or she wants to join the military, right? And so, if you're like me, you say, hey, let me tell you what a great military experience I had and what it can do for you and what the risks are candidly. But then let me tell you what happens when you get out. You will have this great experience, and we want people to say, veterans are important. You will have this great experience with the VA. It's easy to understand, it's easy to navigate, and therefore enlisting looks like a good thing. And so again, it's not, the combination of the two work together. So if it were easier to understand and easier to access, it'd be easier for people, especially influencers, to talk about it that way.
Absolutely. Ironically, I was a couple times asked by the White House to explain VA benefits. They emailed me, And the first question I asked was like, wait, do you guys remember me? But then the second thing was, well, why isn't the VA doing it? But I did it because I want to help and reach as many veterans. And I understand, you know, there almost needs to be a modernization, I think also on social media where the VA needs to have, I hate to say this, I know somebody's gonna get mad at Instagram and TikTok, that's just explaining, I know there's a new guy doing a podcast, you know, it's a difficult thing, you're not gonna get all genres, appeal to all genres of veterans, but, I'd like to see that, and if you are fortunate enough, and I'd love to, help you in any way you can do that.
Sure, well, thank you, but don't forget, veterans aren't all on social media.
That's true.
So I think it's the broader challenge is getting the right information and the right formats. I discovered a lot of them answer the phone when the calls went out. A lot of them write letters. So I think we need to understand that regardless of the time period we're in, we're gonna have multi-channel needs, and so it's sort of all of the above.
No, I think you're right, now that I, heard your argument to that. So we almost need, you know, the book available, we need the website updated, and then perhaps start using social media, so that's great, I like that. So let me ask, sir, in your tenure as the Undersecretary of Benefits, for the VA, what was your proudest accomplishment?
Well, so I got one big one and a couple little ones. Now don't forget, my accomplishments, I was part of a great team. So I mean, at the Veterans Benefits Administration when I was there, 55% of the folks were veterans. So, like, the vast majority was super mission focused, they get it, many could earn more elsewhere, they got it. They were there for a purpose, a lot of them been there multiple years, they could, you know, they could assure. So, one of the things I'm most proud of was when I was there, the backlog of claims, these are claims over 125 days, and when you see people measure it, so this is how they say, is the Veterans Benefits Administration doing their job? And well, the backlog is this number, okay? In 2013, the backlog was 611,000 claims. People were just suffering unaware. When I was there, we drove the claims down to the lowest level ever backlog. It was less than 65,000. In fact, this happened in December of 19. December of 19, we were actually planning, like, what will we do with all these people when we run out of work? So while I was there, I'm very proud that the backlog got to be an all-time low. I hope people beat it, but present team, I think, is like 4 to 5 times higher. So I don't think that's gonna be an issue. But we also did a handful of other things there that are really, really important. So let me kind of run through them real quick. One was, had some problems with the GI Bill implementing the new law. I did a pause and had to reset it. In December 1st of 2019, I met the deadlines, the GI Bill was working. That was really good. The next day on December 2nd, we promised, and that was turned on. Solid Start, the program where call veterans in their first year 3 times. No one could imagine that could be set up and run. That set up and run apparently still continues very successfully. The middle of the month in December, we started a program called the Veterans Benefits Banking Program. A lot of veterans did not get their benefits in a checking account. They got them on a debit card that had tremendous fraud and problems, and you can imagine. Got a bunch of banks to work off to set up, and it continues to this day. It's the Veterans Benefits Banking Program. You can find it. Veterans can get no fee checking accounts.
Wow.
So you can get your benefits at no cost in a checking account, and that was the real big thing why veterans wanted it on a debit card. Hey, these fees are too much. Got a bunch of very pro-veteran, pro-military banks to do this, and now I think there's between banks and credit unions could be close to 100 who will do this. And finally, and this is really important, right? On the date that was promised by the president, legislation awarded the first ever Blue Water Navy claim. Folks, in the Blue Water Navy, and what's really important about this is that law was signed in June, or signed in May of 2019, and promised benefits on January 1st of 2020. Secretary immediately stayed the law, which is put it on pause for 6 months while I could figure out how to do it. And that was
It's
really
very common, people don't
Yeah.
understand about legislation.
And you would have thought just the end of the world was happening. There were press conferences where the VSOs had people out in front saying they're never gonna get their benefits. The pressure was tremendous, right? So we all figured it out, the team was great, and I was really proud on January 1st, okay, so everyone's getting ready to celebrate. On December 31st at noontime, why this is important is, that is when it's actually January 1st in Manila. Okay, so the first claim was actually awarded in Manila, the earliest date possible, and I called the first recipient in his home outside of Washington State and say, you are the first recipient of these benefits from the
Wow.
Blue Water Navy. It is happening on time as we promised, okay? It was really heady feeling. Now, of course, being a veteran, simply said, thank you, and that was the end of our conversation. That's it. Someone will contact you to explain how it's all gonna work and whatever. But yeah, there were four or five things that were really great to know. It could be done, and it just kind of shows what's possible really good team, you know, and again, I think by and large, the folks at VA, especially the Veterans Benefits Administration, it's a really good team. I think leadership is important, I think focus is important, and, you know, all these things can happen again.
Well, I want to tell you again, thank you, first of all, for meeting with me. I honestly never thought you would. But more importantly, thank you for writing the book, thank you for your service, and thank you for your continued service at the VA and the changes that you've made. You know, one last question, where can they get the book?
Sure, the book's on Amazon, okay, it's really easy to do, 2 days, and it is right, I think it's well less than $20, so they can get it there. And you know, thank you for what you're doing. I mean, I was moved by what I listened to and heard to write the book, but I'm happy to talk to people about this to get the right information out. I mean, this is just embarrassing that it's not easy to access, and folks who know should really try to help others get these things, because as you point out, these are game-changing kind of benefits that can really make the difference, and should, for our veterans, for what they've done to earn them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for your time, sir. I really appreciate it. Again, thanks to all the listeners who wrote in, been seeing my videos on this. I'm sorry I'm not posting more because I've been really trying to focus on this. If you don't already have it, I highly recommend it. If you're a veteran, or you care about a veteran, or you just have questions about veterans benefits for someone, for yourself, or whatever, please go check out Dr. Paul Lawrence's book, Veteran Benefits for You. As a former VA Undersecretary, it's super cheap. And thanks guys for tuning in.